LDL and triglycerides both appear on the exact same standard cholesterol panel, and both have been tied to heart disease for decades. But the way these two numbers behave inside your body, and the story they actually tell about your real risk of having a heart attack, it could not be more different. One of these two numbers paints a far more powerful picture than the other, and most people are never told which one is doing the talking. I'm Dr. Sophia, a practicing board-certified primary care physician, and today I'm going to give you the answer directly. I think the answer is going to surprise most of you watching this video. Now, imagine two patients sitting across from me in my office on Monday morning. Patient A has an LDL of 174, which has been flagged red on their lab report as high, but their triglycerides are a clean 82. Patient B has an LDL of 108, perfectly normal by almost every guideline published on the planet, but their triglycerides are 295. Now most people, and honestly a lot of physicians, would immediately reach for a prescription pad for patient A and tell patient B to watch what they eat a little more carefully. But here is what I would actually be thinking sitting across from each one of these individuals. Patient B is the one I would be far more worried about. And the reason why is something most people are never told. Let's start with LDL, what it can genuinely tell you, and what it absolutely cannot. LDL is the number most people remember when they get their blood work back. It is almost always the first number that comes up whenever heart disease is discussed. And it is the number the overwhelming majority of statin prescriptions are written off of. So LDL is not irrelevant. An elevated LDL, particularly in the right context, does matter for cardiovascular risk. But here is the fundamental problem with relying on LDL alone. Judging your heart attack risk by your LDL number alone is like running a major delivery company and only tracking how many parcels leave the warehouse in a single day. The number tells you the operation is busy. It tells you absolutely nothing about whether any of those parcels are carrying hazardous material inside. LDL is a measurement of the cholesterol-carrying particles floating around in your bloodstream, and critically, not all of those particles are equally dangerous. Large, fluffy LDL particles drift through your circulation without causing much trouble at all. These are the safe, sealed envelopes rolling harmlessly through the system. But small, dense LDL particles, the kind produced in a high insulin, high inflammation state, these are the unmarked boxes packed with volatile freight. These are the particles that burrow into the walls of your arteries, oxidize it, and then trigger the inflammatory cascade that gradually builds plaque, narrows the vessels, and ultimately produces strokes and heart attacks. A standard LDL number cannot distinguish between safe envelopes and volatile freight. It counts the total parcel volume leaving the warehouse, but it tells you nothing about what is actually sealed inside any of those parcels. To make it even clearer, two people can have the exact same LDL of, say, 130, and one of them is carrying almost entirely large, fluffy particles that are largely benign, while the other is carrying mostly small, dense particles that are deeply atherogenic. Same number, radically different biology. And this is exactly why two people can sit across from me with the same LDL number and yet face dramatically different cardiovascular risk. LDL alone, stripped of context, the more advanced doctors in this space actually order a test called apolipoprotein Bs, or ApoB, which counts the total number of atherogenic particles regardless of their size, and that is a far more powerful number than LDL alone. But standard lipid panels in most clinics do not include it, so you and your doctor are left reading a number that is doing an incomplete job of describing the actual threat. Now let's flip the page and talk about triglycerides. Triglycerides are the small fat droplets moving through your blood, especially in the hours after a meal. And when they sit elevated consistently, this is not just one more data point on a lab report. Triglycerides are a window into what is happening across your entire metabolic system. High triglycerides tell me your liver is overwhelmed. High triglycerides tell me that insulin resistance is present, or that it is quietly developing right under the surface. And high triglycerides tell me that your HDL, the protective cholesterol that clears the excess from your arterial walls, is being suppressed at the very same time. This is precisely what makes elevated triglycerides so clinically concerning. They are not one isolated problem. They are a fingerprint that multiple problems are unfolding at once, frequently in silence, frequently in someone who looks perfectly healthy on the cover page of a standard lipid panel. They are almost a stand-in for full metabolic syndrome, the cluster of insulin resistance, central adiposity, elevated blood pressure, elevated blood sugar, abnormal lipids that, taken together, drive the vast majority of cardiovascular events my generation of physicians sees in practice. Now, here is where I want to give you the direct answer. Because there is a critical nuance to this that most people never get to hear. So which of these two numbers, in the majority of cases, is actually the more dangerous signal? Well, here is the honest clinical answer. It depends on context. But in the context most relevant to the majority of the people watching this video, elevated triglycerides are the more immediately dangerous signal. And here is why: a high LDL in an otherwise metabolically healthy person, someone with low triglycerides, healthy HDL, low inflammation, no insulin resistance, and a clean waist circumference, carries a meaningfully different and generally lower risk than the same LDL number sitting inside someone with metabolic dysfunction. But elevated triglycerides are almost never a benign isolated finding. When your triglycerides run high, insulin resistance is almost always sitting in the background. When insulin resistance is present, your body is busy manufacturing small dense LDL particles, those unmarked boxes of volatile freight in large numbers, even when your LDL number still looks completely normal on paper. When small dense LDL particles are elevated, arterial damage is happening regardless of what your LDL number is showing on the surface. When HDL is simultaneously suppressed, which almost always rides alongside high triglycerides, your body's natural cholesterol cleanup system is also compromised. So the patient with elevated triglycerides is not dealing with just one risk factor. They are dealing with a stacked deck. And that stacked deck, firing all at once, is exactly where heart attacks come from, the ones that take people completely by surprise in their 40s and 50s when they felt fine the day before. The bottom line is this: a high LDL in a metabolically healthy person does not always mean something dangerous is happening. But elevated triglycerides always mean something is wrong. Research published in Circulation, one of the most respected journals in cardiovascular medicine, has consistently shown that the combination of high triglycerides and low HDL cholesterol, which again nearly always travel together, is among the strongest predictors of coronary artery disease across multiple large population studies. More predictive than LDL standing alone. Independent work published in the Journal of the American Heart Association reached the same conclusion, that triglyceride-rich lipoproteins and depressed HDL carry predictive weight that LDL simply does not capture on its own. The signal is consistent across populations, across age groups, and across ethnicities. And critically, this heightened risk has been shown to remain significant even in patients whose LDL was completely normal. Exactly the kind of patient most physicians would instinctively tell to relax. Let me bring in one more patient to make this even more concrete, because I want you to feel this, not just hear it. Patient C comes to me with an LDL of 138, flagged yellow by the lab software as borderline. Their triglycerides are 110, which their previous doctor described as a little high but nothing urgent. Their HDL is 38, just under the typical cutoff of 40 for men. Their fasting glucose is creeping up at 104. Their blood pressure is 138/86. Their waist is 41 inches. Now take the triglycerides, divide by the HD, 10 divided by 38 equals 553. That number alone, sitting quietly in the middle of an okay-looking report, is telling me that this patient has metabolic syndrome, that their artery walls are being assaulted daily by small dense LDL particles, and that their 10-year cardiovascular risk is dramatically higher than the LDL of 138 would ever suggest. If I only ever looked at this patient through the lens of LDL, I would undertreat them. If I look at them through the lens of triglycerides and the triglyceride to HDL ratio, I see the real picture immediately. This is exactly the kind of patient that guidelines miss, and exactly the kind of patient I built this channel to catch earlier. So let us return to my original two patients. Patient A has an LDL of 174, triglycerides of 82, and let us give them an HDL of 62. If you take the triglycerides and divide them by the HDL, 82 divided by 62, that equals 132. This is a metabolically clean picture. The LDL absolutely warrants ongoing monitoring and a thoughtful follow-up conversation, but the broader metabolic environment is not manufacturing dangerous quantities of small dense particles. Now contrast this with patient B, who has an LDL of 108 but triglycerides of 295 and an HDL of 37. Take the triglycerides, divide by the HDL, 295 divided by 37 equals 7.97. This is a metabolic red flag in plain sight. The perfectly normal-looking LDL number is hiding what is actually a hostile internal environment, producing exactly the kind of arterial damage that leads to heart attacks, strokes, and sudden cardiac events, often in people who feel absolutely nothing in the days or weeks leading up to them. Patient B is the one I'm worried about every single time I see those numbers, every single time without exception. I touched on that ratio a moment ago, but I want to slow down and drive this point home, because it is one of the most important things I can teach you today. The triglyceride to HDL ratio is one of the strongest accessible indirect markers of both insulin resistance and small dense LDL particle burden that you can extract from a standard lipid panel. And it costs nothing extra to calculate. There is no special test, no referral, no out-of-pocket expense. You take your triglycerides, you divide them by your HDL, and the number that comes out tells you more about your actual cardiovascular risk in this moment than almost anything else printed on that page. Here are the ranges I want you to know. A ratio below 2 is what I want reflected on my patient's labs. It points to a clean metabolic environment, low small dense LDL burden, and low insulin resistance risk. Anything from 2 up to 3. 5 is worth paying very close attention to, a yellow light zone where focused changes in diet, daily movement, sleep quality, and stress management can usually pull you back into a safer range within weeks to months. Anything above 3.5. And I will sit down and have a very direct conversation with my patient about metabolic health, regardless of what their LDL looks like, regardless of how much they weigh, regardless of how they feel on the surface. Take out your most recent blood work and run this calculation right now, today, before you forget. This number tells you more about your real cardiovascular risk at this current moment than your LDL ever could on its own. And it is hiding in plain sight on the report that your doctor already printed for you. Now, here's the thing most people get completely wrong about what is actually driving their elevated triglycerides. And before we walk through what is causing those triglycerides to climb in the first place, I would love to ask you to please consider subscribing to this channel. Every subscriber genuinely helps push this information out to the people who need to hear it most. This channel primarily exists to give you the knowledge and the tools to stay as healthy as you possibly can for as long as you possibly can. I am also working hard to change the way the primary care system is currently managed. So getting this message out truly does go a long way. Most people, including a surprising number of physicians, have been taught for the last 40 years that elevated triglycerides come from dietary fat, especially saturated fat. They cut out the butter. They cut out the red meat. They cut out the eggs. They eat lower fat everything, fat-free yogurt, fat-free dressings, baked potato chips, heart-healthy margarine, and their triglycerides barely move, or sometimes they actually get worse. Here is the truth many people never hear. Dietary fats are not the primary driver of elevated triglycerides for the vast majority of people walking around with high numbers. The primary driver is refined carbohydrates and processed sugars. When you eat excess refined carbohydrates, things like white bread, white rice, conventional pasta, sugary drinks, ultra-processed snacks, packaged cereals, sweet coffee drinks, fruit juices marketed as healthy, your liver takes that excess glucose and converts it directly into triglycerides through a metabolic pathway called de novo lipogenesis. Your liver is literally turning sugar into fat and shipping it out into the bloodstream, droplet by droplet. The more refined carbohydrates and added sugars you consume consistently, day after day, the higher your triglycerides climb and the more small dense LDL particles that environment generates. This is exactly why someone can eat a strict low-fat diet for years, loading up on pasta, rice, bread, and lean packaged foods and still run triglycerides above 200. And it is also exactly why someone eating a higher fat diet built around whole unprocessed foods, real butter, whole eggs, quality meats, vegetables, avocado, olive oil, often runs triglycerides comfortably below 100, sometimes without even trying. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition demonstrated that replacing dietary fat with refined carbohydrates actually increased triglyceride levels and worsened the small dense LDL pattern, the exact opposite of what most people have been told to believe for decades. That mismatch between what the public has been led to believe and what the science actually shows is one of the biggest reasons I built this channel in the first place. If you are looking for additional specific things to dial down in your daily routine beyond just obvious sweets, here is a short, practical list. Sweet, it costs virtually nothing. Gerald, 68, a retired mechanic, described feeling like he ran out of gas mid-afternoon, even when his morning started strong. After introducing baking soda 3 times a week alongside light stretching, deep breathing, and a short walk, he told me, "It feels like the engine's turning over again. I cannot promise that baking soda alone will reverse how mitochondria age, but supporting them by reducing the acid burden on the body, that I can confidently speak to. It is one of the simpler, more accessible innovations you can build, and it stacks quietly with everything else you are already doing right. Benefit number 6, it may help your body use its own hormones and signals more effectively. Even when your testosterone or other hormone levels come back normal on a standard lab test, the signal sometimes does not feel as strong as it should through your day. Chronic acid load and low-grade inflammation can dull the way your receptors respond to the hormones your body is already making. Think of it like a shout across a noisy room. The words are right, the message is right, but the wall of static keeps it muffled. Sodium bicarbonate may help by reducing some of that static, allowing your existing hormonal signals to come through more clearly where they are meant to land. Martin, 64, a retired police officer, added small, careful doses of baking soda to his routine, alongside better sleep, daily walking, and cleaner meals. 6 weeks later, he said, "My drive's coming back, not just in one part of my life, everywhere. It is like something switched back on." Baking soda does not raise hormone levels directly. What it may do is help your body use the hormones you already have more effectively, the ones you are already producing on your own. That distinction matters, especially as you talk with your own physician about what is right for you and your specific lab profile. Benefit number 7, gently supports kidney filtration and metabolic balance. Your kidneys are responsible for keeping your blood chemistry in a healthy range, and as men cross 60, that balancing act becomes a little more delicate, especially if you are on common medications that change how your kidneys handle sodium and acid. Sodium bicarbonate is in fact one of the most carefully studied interventions for supporting kidney function in people whose blood tends to run too acidic. Published clinical reviews going back over a decade have consistently shown that, under appropriate medical supervision, oral bicarbonate therapy supports kidney function and may slow the rate of functional decline in patients with reduced kidney reserve. That is not a marketing line. That is a body of research that nephrologists have been quietly relying on for years. Carlos, 70, felt sluggish despite a clean lifestyle, and his morning labs showed his bicarbonate levels were running at the lower end of the reference range. A small, carefully timed baking soda routine alongside steady hydration left him feeling lighter, more energetic, and steadier through the afternoon. This is one benefit where the research base is genuinely strong. That does not mean self-prescribing without your doctor's awareness, especially if you already know your kidneys are not at their best. It means the science behind it has been studied carefully. The findings are consistent across multiple populations and the foundational logic has stood up to scrutiny. Benefit number 8, may help curb after-meal sugar spikes and cravings. Heavier meals, late-night snacks, and decades of refined carbohydrates can leave men over 60 with unpredictable blood sugar swings, energy crashes, and stubborn cravings that quietly drive more of the same eating, day after month after year. Sodium bicarbonate, taken around mealtime in modest, careful doses, may help buffer the acid load that comes with these patterns and support steadier post-meal energy, which in turn reduces the desperate need to reach for something sweet an hour later. Jack, 66, struggled with sudden afternoon energy drops and a sweet tooth he described as automatic, almost like a switch he could not turn off. Adding a small dose of baking soda in water around lunch helped curb those cravings, improved how stable he felt through the afternoon, and gradually restored his confidence around food. The mechanism is simple: less acid load on the body, calmer post-meal chemistry, less of that desperate need to reach for a quick fix. Over weeks, when sugar cravings quiet down, the rest of your habits get easier to maintain on their own, because the noise that was driving them has softened. Benefit number 9, may help calm the nervous system and support restful sleep. How you feel through the day is not just physical. Your nervous system matters enormously, and often more than any single supplement or workout plan. When chronic acid and inflammation build quietly in the background, your body can stay in a low-level alert state, the kind that keeps you from sleeping deeply, from waking rested, and from feeling fully grounded the next morning. By reducing some of that background load, baking soda may allow the parasympathetic side of your nervous system, the side responsible for rest, repair, and recovery, to take the lead more often. Tom, 70, a retired military officer, told me he had not slept deeply in years, and he assumed that was just part of getting older. Baking soda did not fix his sleep on its own, but reducing his systemic acid load seemed to help him settle into deeper sleep within a few weeks. He reported feeling calmer, more responsive, and more connected to his daily life. Sleep is the foundation under everything else, including energy, hormones, mood, and even sexual health. Anything that protects that foundation is worth paying attention to, especially as the decades add up. Benefit number 10, the special morning combination I promised at the start. Now that we have walked through the foundation, it is time to reveal the morning ritual one of my patients used that completely transformed his mornings. A simple combination: warm water, the fresh juice of half a small lemon, and a small measured amount of baking soda. When you stir them together, the mixture gently fizzes, That is the acid from the lemon meeting the bicarbonate, producing a small release of carbon dioxide right in the glass. Many of my patients describe this as the most pleasant way to take baking soda, because the lemon masks the mild mineral taste and the gentle fizzing feels alive in the morning. The acidic lemon and apple cider vinegar react gently with the bicarbonate, producing a release of carbon dioxide that may support liver bile flow, gentle vascular tone, and the absorption of trace minerals from your morning water. All in one short ritual. Barry, 74, a longtime patient of mine, tried this morning ritual every single day for an entire month. The recipe was simple: roughly 8 ounces of warm water, the juice of half a fresh lemon squeezed into it, and a quarter teaspoon of baking soda. It stirred gently until the fizz settled and the glass was uniform. A month later he told me, "I wake up feeling alive. My mind is clearer, my digestion is noticeably easier, and I feel like my body is responding again." The full effect he describes comes from these entire foundation working together. Sleep, hydration, the lemon, the small daily bicarbonate nudge, none of it works alone. All of it works together, which is the exact point. Here is your practical protocol to take with you, so you can build this into your own mornings starting this week. Start small: half a teaspoon of baking soda, dissolved in roughly 8 ounces of plain water, taken on an empty stomach in the morning. Frequency: 3 to 4 mornings per week to begin. Then, after your body has settled into that for 2 weeks, move to your choice of either plain warm water with the bicarbonate or the warm lemon water version, 3 to 5 mornings per week. Add a small measured amount of raw apple cider vinegar instead of lemon on days when you want a change of pace. Supportive habits around it: light daily movement your body genuinely enjoys, whether that is walking, swimming, cycling, or light strength training. Slow deep nasal breathing for 2 to 3 minutes each morning. In through the nose, out longer than you breathe in. Balanced whole food meals built around protein, vegetables, and minimally processed carbohydrates like oats, sweet potatoes, and legumes rather than refined bread and pasta. Steady hydration through the day, generally around half your body weight in ounces of water spread across the day, adjusted for your climate and your doctor's guidance. Pause and reassess every 2 to 3 weeks. Watch how you feel in the morning, how you sleep at night, how digestion responds, and how clearly you think through the afternoon. That subjective feedback matters more than any single lab number on a printout, because the goal here is how you actually feel across the day, going into your 70s and 80s. And please hear me clearly on this. If you have any history of kidney disease, heart failure, uncontrolled high blood pressure, are on a low-sodium diet, or take prescription medications for blood pressure, diuretics, lithium, corticosteroids, or any chronic condition, talk to your doctor before you begin. Baking soda contains real sodium. Even at modest doses, it can matter for certain medical conditions. This content is education, not a prescription, and it is for men who are looking for ideas to bring to their own physician, not for men who are trying to manage a known diagnosis on their own. I want to leave you with something important. If you have been feeling frustrated, slower than you used to be, or quietly discouraged that your body is not responding the way it once did, you are not broken. Your body may simply be carrying decades of small accumulated metabolic load that was never addressed, and it may just need gentle, consistent support and time to come back into balance. Baking soda is not a miracle, but as part of a stronger foundation of better sleep, real food, daily movement, and steady hydration, it can be a surprisingly supportive nudge, the kind that quietly compounds in the right direction week after week. Even after 60, you are capable of feeling clearer, stronger, steadier, and more connected to your own life again. You deserve that. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.